The next part of my story starts with my family and me moving from the desert in Arizona to the Prairies and Lakes part of Texas, a city called Waxahachie, where for the first time I wasn't in the church I grew up in, but a larger church from the same background. And it was wonderful. Like, we were the weird little family that had just come out of a cult. We always call it the cult because it was like that. And this was just an amazing new experience it was ecstasy for me. And for the first time in my life, I went to a church youth camp. And that is actually why I called this Iron Springs, because that was the name of that youth camp, but it also fits the rest of this time period. So, it was wonderful. The singing was wonderful. I learned, the songs had been a big part of my upbringing because we were a cappella, so we didn't have a band or any instruments, so we learned to sing, and that's how we did the worship. But we learned like 500 new songs that were just amazing to sing together with other teenagers out in the country, away from all that dysfunctionality that I'd come from. What you doing, Mara? And there was this one thing we did called Circle Devo, where every night at camp we would all make concentric circles out in this little clearing in the midst of the woods and sing all these songs arm in arm, and we would always end with this one same song. And there's some amazing things you can do with just human voices and nothing else. But, oh man, I imagined that the veil between heaven and earth at Circle Devo was so thin that you could just tap it and it would shatter and you would see heaven. But you all tangled up again. But everything wasn't perfect at this time. But that first year that I went to camp, I decided to get baptized. Actually, I saw another kid get baptized and heard that she was redoing it. She didn't think that she had really known what she was doing the first time. I had never heard of someone else going through that before. But then I was kind of validated that this was a thing, and I wouldn't be shameful for me to do it. And I had really wanted that for a long time, so I went and did it. And then I found out that my sister felt the same way, and she did that. And I soon found out that this was a common thing in our church background, and it's because of the unhealthy emphasis on baptism and making people worry about whether theirs was good enough. And so every year, the most wonderful thing, and the thing that I just longed for all year, was going back to that camp. But after I was baptized again, and I'll be glad when I get through this part of the story, because I did not like fixating on baptism all the time. Very unhealthy. That was more important than Jesus to us. But anyway, I didn't stop worrying about it after that, but my reasons changed. And so I thought, is this just a habit for me to worry about this now? Or is this for real? Because I realized that there was all these other things that I hadn't thought about. I had thought this one thing was, I was young, I didn't know what I was doing. Now, I actually started thinking about, what does Scripture actually say about it? And I read it hard for myself to try to understand it. And I realized that according to what it says, you can't really know that you're good enough, which is kind of the whole point of needing to be saved. You can't save yourself, you need help. But even the things involved in getting yourself washed for salvation are pretty subjective, and you can't prove that you believe without a doubt, that you have repented with all your heart, and that you have been baptized with the right timing and method and stuff like that, because that's not given in Scripture. So I realized that, I was going to have to take this on faith or try even harder to get it right again. But that was just, I was horrified by that idea. And so I held off and I paid attention to other people. And I noticed that that other people let their kids get baptized when they were younger sometimes, and they weren't worried about it. In fact, they seemed to be the more mentally, the most well put together people, the most psychologically healthy. And but I didn't think, but I would ask little questions to other kids who'd been baptized sometimes, just to kind of see what they thought. And they and I didn't think that they really understood it as well as I did, because I had studied it hard. And then I was worried about other people, and I was becoming really attached to a lot of people, and I realized that nobody really knew completely, what we were all doing. We knew what it meant to us to different degrees. But something that changed was I cared more about other people's salvation than my own. I realized that it seemed to be a matter of conscience. If your conscience was right about it, then you were okay. And so I thought maybe I was doomed because my conscience had been broken. And so I was never going to be okay. But if I started raising questions with other people and planting seeds of doubt in their minds, as had been done to me, then I was going to harm their consciences, and then they would be doomed. And so I decided to stay quiet, and instead of psychologically harm other people, as I had by questioning, whether they were okay or not, I would allow them to live their lives, blissfully free of doubt and be saved, and myself silently be lost because of my own broken conscience or something like that. But that shift made me able to open myself intellectually a little more, and one thing that was interesting was that everybody always had their spiritual birth date. My spiritual birthday was this day. Well, I didn't have that. And if someone redid it, then they would just call the second time, the time they redid it, they would call that their spiritual birthday. But I wasn't comfortable with that. In fact, I wasn't, because I was really doubting that one too. So I wasn't really sure which one, if either, was more valid. This is all so ridiculous. This is a big, silly religious muddle that, like I say, I'm happy to be over long time ago. But I realized there's this scripture that says there's one baptism. So I realized that if I was really saved, but didn't really know which day it was it really that one of those times was legitimate and it worked? Or was it that it didn't really depend on my effort and all of my attempting to understand this and get it right? And that the one baptism somehow wasn't either of those particular events. It was just something I'd gotten a glimpse of, something I had experienced somewhat, if imperfectly, on both those occasions. So they were both legitimate. Not because I had any clue what I was doing either time. And that was one important move I had toward mystical thinking. I didn't call it that. I didn't know it was that. But I thought of both of those days. I let go. I was just like, this isn't right. I'm just going to trust God. And if I'm lost, I'm lost. But I don't care anymore. I'm just going to trust God. I'm going to choose to trust. And I'm going to look at both of those days as somehow, me tasting the mystery of what baptism really is. So there's one baptism, but it was both of those days. Okay. was already way too much about that. But that's kind of a move in the direction of mystical thinking, though, where we're not scientifically trying to quantify our faith, but we're recognizing that it's a mystery deeper than we can understand. And they weren't mean in this church, but they also, like most churches, this isn't a problem with them, it's just most places I've been, they weren't particularly open-minded, I would say, about a lot of the kind of questions I had. And because I'm friends with a lot of you guys from there on here, so like, I'm just telling my story, okay? Don't take it personal. But I mean, I cared about things that I couldn't really talk about with anyone there. Like, well, what about all the other people in the world? I was not okay with the idea that they were lost. And to just accept cliche answers like, well, we won't judge anyone, but we can't control other people's choices. It's like, so really? So they're just all going down the drain. And so I didn't want to do nothing, but I wanted to understand. I didn't want to charge ahead. I wanted to go rescue people, but I didn't want to just charge ahead ignorantly and harm people for the same reason that I hadn't wanted to question people's salvation, planting seeds of doubts and doom in their minds. So I thought I should not do this, haphazardly. So again, I studied for myself, by myself, because I didn't know who else to talk to, and they had a church library, and I read some of the stuff in there, and interestingly, there was stuff I don't know who donated them or if anyone else read them, but like I read for the first time about the Babylonian creation epic and how it mirrors the biblical creation story, and how some think that one was based on the other or vice versa, or that there is some other original that they were both from. And I was like, this is kind of scary, but also super fascinating. And that was stuff that I couldn't, talk to anyone about. But I studied other religions. Like at work, at my first real job, I had a manager who, when he realized I was interested in this stuff, he would stop me and talk to me until I was like, okay, man, I like this, but I got to get back to work. But he gave me the stack of books he had read about religions and cults and stuff. And I was like, this is awesome. And I read it all up. And I just, realized a bigger world than I had known. And I didn't just uncritically accept things, but I could see reason and enlightenment when I saw it. I've always been really slow to accept new things, but really quick to listen to new things, if you know what I mean. Really, because it would just be silly to assume that where I come from and where I begin is the default best place to begin. Of course, I should want to hear what else there is to try to get a fuller picture of reality. But it was chipping away at my confidence in my faith, though, because the more I learned, the more I could tell something was missing. And actually, this weird thing happened, that once I didn't worry about my own salvation anymore, it's almost like my religious compass needle didn't point north anymore, because my whole religion had been built around fear of condemnation, fear of hell. So once that disappeared, that had been my experience of that's feeling God being there, feeling the possibility of being judged. So once that feeling was gone, I didn't feel God there anymore. Now, I had always loved God and I never had believed that God wanted to judge me, but I thought he had to. But once I didn't feel that anymore, then I wasn't so sure. I didn't say this out loud to myself even, or anyone else for sure, but I wasn't sure anymore if that good God I loved so much was there, because I just didn't feel all of it anymore. I felt free, but that also made me feel kind of loose and unmoored and just wondering. So that's where the next chapter starts, and when I went to college. And college can mess with your head.